Hi, this is Juliana, and we are back to those basics of escrow. In the previous videos, I told you what escrow was. I also told you what we needed. And once you gave us what we wanted, we could open the escrow. Now, what actually happens when you enter into an escrow? Let's say an escrow for the purchase and sale of real property in California. What actually happens? How does this process actually work? Well, today I'd like to summarize this for you and from everybody's viewpoint. What happens when you go into escrow? First of all, the buyer should be sending in their good faith deposit. And the parties, the buyers and the sellers, should be sending in their contract. Or if you don't have a written contract, at least the verbal conditions, so that we may prepare the opening packages, the escrow instructions, and all the pertinent documents that go with that. We will prepare the opening package and send them out to you. In addition, we will be starting a preliminary report search, asking a title company to start up the search on the ownership of the property. Now, what is the process for the buyer? First and foremost, they need to review, sign, and return all the opening paperwork that we send them. They will also schedule a physical inspection of the property. Normally, that is done with an inspector going out and looking at the property. They will also, if they're getting a loan, at this time, they will be contacting a loan broker or a lender and seeing what type of a loan they're going to be getting, what are the rates, and so forth. They should also be looking into insurance, property insurance, homeowners insurance. Look for an agent and ask them for a quote with the coverage that you are going to need. This is not too early of a time to prepare the funds for closing, not at all. So at this time, you should also be putting together where the money is going to come from for the closing. What is it that the seller needs to do? They too have to review, sign, and return their opening paperwork. If a termite inspection is called for in the contract, then a termite company needs to be contacted to go out, take a look, see what kind of corrective work is needed and how much it is going to cost. This is also a good time at the opening of escrow to prepare for the appraisal inspection by the buyer's lender if they're getting a new loan. Because if the appraiser comes in good, obviously it will benefit the transaction and the buyer's loan will go through smoothly. If the buyer's inspector for this physical inspection has gone out and they have looked and seen some repairs that have to be made, some might be major, some might be minor, this is the time where the seller would agree or not agree to do the repairs. This is up to the seller and the buyer to negotiate. It is not too late at the beginning of escrow to arrange for the delivery of the property at the closing. So the seller will obviously need to know, where am I going to move to? Or do I need to move anywhere? These are things that the seller will have to think about at the opening of escrow. Now, what is it that the escrow officer does through the transaction? First of all, they will review all the returned opening paperwork because we don't know if there's going to be something in that paperwork that is unusual or that calls for us to make some additional amendments to the transaction or so forth. We also need to review the preliminary title report search that we asked for, because if there's anything unusual in that search, well, now's the time to let the parties know. For instance, let's say there's easements on the property that look kind of strange, or there's an encroachment, or maybe the seller has another loan that he didn't know about. This is the time during the process that we need to let the parties know. We have to communicate with the buyer's lender. So once the buyer has decided who they're going to use as a lender, we will be contacting them. this lender is going to require a lot of things from us. For instance, the escrow instructions, the contract, a copy of the preliminary report. They're going to need settlement statements to show the buyer and the seller's closing costs. We also have to communicate with the seller's existing lender. If there's a loan to be paid off, we have to contact them and get the formal demand for payment. Finally, we are going to need to order the buyer's insurance when the time comes. So at that time, the lender is going to require the buyer's insurance, and we need to be able to hand it to them. As we go through the transaction, there's going to be bills that come in to be paid, and we have to review them all. The termite bill, the home protection bill, bills for the repairs, all these things have to be looked over and put into the system. We have to review all the conditions of the contract. Has everything been met? Are we missing anything? For instance, is there a city report that the seller needed to give us? Is there a home protection policy that the agent needed to give us? All these things have to be met, and we need to make sure that they are done before the closing. We are going to need to put together a seller's estimate to show how much proceeds they're going to have. And when the buyer's loan documents come in, then we're going to need to look over the loan documents. We're going to have to see if they have the property address correct, if the buyer's name is correct. All these things have to be reviewed before we call the buyer and let them know that we need to schedule a signing. At that time, we will also be preparing the buyer's estimate to show them how much money we're going to need before we close. Once the buyer's documents are signed, then they are returned to the lender together with all the funding conditions. And these funding conditions could very well be things like the buyer's insurance, a copy of the termite completion, all the amendments and escrow instructions that we have in the file. This is the last chance for us to make sure that everything that we need to have in the transaction is completed, because then comes the closing. At least 2 days before the closing, sometimes more, the buyer and the seller will be doing a walkthrough. Now, that is usually outside of escrow. We don't take care of the walkthrough, but there are things that happen sometimes during the walkthrough that will require perhaps the seller to make an additional repair or so forth, and it might require additional time to be extended. So a buyer and seller's walkthrough is done. And in the meanwhile, escrow will be sending the title company all the necessary recorded documents. For instance, the grant deed, the deed of trust, all of the seller's payoff information will be sent to the title company for them to review and hold for the closing. The buyer's final funds, at least 2 days before the closing, we're going to need to have the buyer's final closing funds, and then we're going to issue a receipt. And the reason for the buyer's funds to come in 2 days before closing is because 1 day before closing, the lender is going to fund their loan. And they will not fund their loan until all the conditions are already in that they need, and they have a copy of the buyer's money. So once the lender funds the loan, then the escrow company will set up the closing with the title company for the next day. On the day of closing, the escrow will balance the files with all the fees, all the invoices from the lender, from the title company, from the seller's payoff. We will figure out the commission. We will figure out all of the things that need to be paid, and then we will issue the final closing statements to the parties. We will issue all the checks for the payments. If there's a refund to the buyer, that's going to come. And then finally, of course, all of the seller's net proceeds will be sent. The buyer and the seller on the day of closing will handle the transfer of the keys and possession. And once this is done, then the escrow transaction is deemed to be closed. So what does this mean? In other words, I, as the escrow holder, am stuck in the middle with you. For instance, I am the escrow holder and I've got the buyer here. I've got the seller over there. I've got the buyer's new lender handling the buyer stuff. I've got the seller's payoff lender handling the other stuff on his side. And we've got the title company and we've got all of the payoff people that I have to handle, send out the payments for. So, as the escrow holder, I am in the center of things. Thank you very much. Today, my t-shirt is the square root of 4356. As you can see, I've got my t-shirt on. And what the story behind this is that I am 67 years old this year, and my husband decided that everybody needs to know. And the way to figure it out is to give them the square root so that they can figure it out that I am 67 years old. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you will watch my other forthcoming videos. If you have any questions, please give me a jingle or an email at my email address over here. And then, of course, if you have anything else that you are interested in, be sure that you check out my website, juliana2.com. Thank you. Have a good day.